Hi everyone, welcome to Babbling Irons. You've got myself and you've got Sloth here today to go through what seems to be an interesting time for West Ham's midfield. The engine room seems to be under quite considerable review, probably with only one player at this point looking safe from a central position, and that is obviously Lucas Paquetá, who obviously is rumoured to have had a bid in, or at least some interest from Newcastle, although I doubt that's going anywhere. But today, there's been some interesting rumours about two potentially outgoing players. I think both of these potential outgoings, me and Sloth very much agree with. So let's kind of get into who they are first. So there is obviously the rumour, it's coming through from TalkSport, that Southampton are looking to move for Flynn Downes. Now, obviously, before it was talked about potentially a loan deal. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a perm deal to take Flynn Downes to Southampton. He's very much knows the league. It's guaranteed first team football, especially with the likes of potentially Ward Prowse and so on leaving. And there's also rumours that Thomas SOUČEK may also be allowed to leave West Ham, obviously entering in the last year of his contract. Ideally, we should have sold him last season, not because anything about him being a good or a bad player, but mainly because of his contract situation. Once David Moyes decided to reject the renewal of his contract, it has put us in an uncomfortable position where we have very little sale value on a player that we could have got probably more last season than we can this season, because he only has a year left. And in fact, in 6 months, any European team can agree, or in fact, any world team, and obviously with all of everything that's going on in the Middle East at the moment with players, there's every chance they might wait 6 months in which to give him a very bumper deal to go out. So we've kind of hamstrung ourselves there, I think, with SOUČEK. It's kind of at a point where give him a contract or sell him. But first off, before we get into the potential replacements, because there were a couple that's been come out recently, what do you feel on those two kind of outgoings there, Sloth?
I mean, they're two big personalities, aren't they? Really, like one's a West Ham through and through, and I kind of mentioned the other day how important I feel like that is to have around the club. Flynn Downes, I kind of was vocal about the transfer at the time, that I don't really feel like there's any ambition in that sort of signing. Not that he's not a solid player, but it doesn't progress us in any way, shape or form beyond a homegrown number. So if we're looking at, say, getting in a homegrown player to replace him, then it's got to be one of quality. But you do lose that passion or love of the club that I think is very important to have around. In terms of SOUČEK, look, I've said it time and time again, my thoughts on him. I do think we lose something potentially very valuable, particularly if we're chasing a game or defending. His aerial ability and his just willingness to throw himself at anything that moves is very valuable. And we saw what he can do in his first season and a half. It's a shame it's come to this. Particularly, I think the whole non-renewal thing was very strange. I think it's, as you said, it's very poorly handled. But I'm not going to argue that it's very, in my opinion, it's very easy to replace. And I just kind of question whether we could have capitalized on form previously, and it's a strange one, because it's going to be a big summer if we let these two go on top of Rice, and then you're looking at integrating new players, and we all know that's not one
as well. So that's technically, we could potentially lose up to 4 or get rid of up to 4 central midfielders from last season.
Yeah, and we always hear how difficult it is to integrate new players. As I said, it's not Moyes' strong suit either, and I think if you're doing that, you're looking at a big list of players coming in, and we all know the risks, the cliche with that, particularly if you look at, say, Spurs trying to replace Gareth Bale. It is a risk.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's absolutely a risk. Do you think that something that I saw earlier, that it's maybe even it's made me the point as well to kind of really say that for West Ham to change tact in terms of the style, the deployment of how they play on the pitch, is this actually needed? That it's actually a radical overhaul is actually needed in which to actually facilitate a complete change in the team, or is it maybe other restrictions that maybe giving that thought process that we do need to get on these players? And I guess maybe there's also maybe a point to the reason why the likes of SOUČEK are also potentially for sale is because they are unhappy. They are maybe not as settled as perceived, and maybe they are, if possible, said to the club if something comes in, they'd like to hear it and would like the opportunity to go.
I mean, it could really be any of the above. When you think about it, it's a tough one, because it's long been our gripe that we don't know when to sell players, we don't know when to move them on, and it's a real head scratcher for me if we're looking at moving on SOUČEK, yet we're giving Ogbonna and Cresswell new contracts. You know, it's a strange one, but I understand that one of them is a homegrown number, the other is, you know, a much loved figure at West Ham,
and probably just happy to be in and around the squad for another season.
Probably, yeah, but I don't know. As I said, it's. I think it's almost like someone said the maximum amount of players you can have is 15, and then the rest, they're all going to be cannon fodder, and the level of Flynn Downs. There's no sort of set plan. And when I say that, I don't mean that we haven't tried to change how we play. I just don't think we've recruited at the level needed to change how we play. And I don't mean that in terms of criticising overall players. I just think we get distracted by shiny objects as a club. And if we want to commit to a style of play, we have to commit to it for more than just a few transfer windows. You have to go for it. And if you're going to get Scamacca in, you also need to think we need pace around him. We need to do that. If we can't add it this window, we do it the next window. Don't add Danny Ings if you're going to look to try and play this faster football and, you know, really utilise a big figure up top. You need to try and build, as opposed to going, right, we're going to change everything, knock everything down, start over.
Yeah. And as you say, it's not even a season is given to those ideals. It tends to be, if it's not instant success, knock it down, start again. Let's go back to a damage limitation approach, which keeps us within the league and keeps us where we are. But obviously, we've talked about this two that could be potentially going. So that's, you know, again, showing there's a potential merry-go-round going on at West Ham. Two players that have been talked about have been Sander Berge of Sheffield United. So the interesting thing here is apparently the stories come about through a third party going round to clubs, and in particular coming to West Ham to see whether they would be interested in Sander Berge. So again, it's not even that we've approached Sheffield United. It's apparently through third party, essentially intermediaries. It always happens in football. It's not actually that uncommon. Have come to West Ham to see if we are interested, and therefore to obviously attempt to try and broker a deal. Rumours are, I think, of around £10 million because he is into his last year of his contract. And there has been a call around Dennis Zakaria. Obviously, was at Chelsea last season on loan. Not wanted by Juventus. So again, potential for maybe a loan deal, maybe a cut price, maybe I think it's around 18 million euros deal. I think so. It's about 15 million pounds, give or take. Do you look at those two deals and say they are essentially like for like, if not upgrades on both those players if they were to go? And if we were looking as to actually bring in both of those players in which to replace, say, Downes and also SOUČEK?
I think they're undeniable upgrades. It's just a case of the fitness record. You know, both players do have that fitness doubt. And remember, BERGE is a player that, you know, Moyes turned down initially. Mm-hmm. We were in that race with Sheffield United and we missed out. And, you know, that was part of Park Moyes just saying, well, I don't think it's worth it in the end. Now, £10 million, I think that's a good deal, to be honest. You know, we've seen what he can do. He's got the athleticism that I think Moyes perhaps doubted he did have. And he has got a lot of ability. He definitely keeps the sort of aerial threat that we would lose in SOUČEK. But I still kind of question whether that's much of a upgrade. It definitely is on Flynn Downs, but you know, if I was looking at someone and I wanted to upgrade SOUČEK, I'd probably be looking at Billing. As we said, last 12 months of his contract, still relatively young, and also big physical unit, but gets goals, gets assists, good on the ball. Now, he's also got pretty good injury record. Like he's you know, pretty clean this season. But I just kind of worry. It's one of those where I think they're great additions, but when it comes to sort of keeping a core unit of a club or even trying to progress us forward, I think it could be a case of settling them in. And I know that sounds silly when they've both spent time in England, but let's not forget Sander Berge has been out of the Premier League, and he was out of the Premier League for a large time while they were still in it because he was injured. So Sheffield United have got that conundrum. To be honest, I think they'd probably let him leave. If you offered them £10 million, they might take it just because they know they can probably replace him with a fairly fit player who is a regular starter for them. And they obviously would be confident because of their recruitment record, particularly over the past sort of 12 months. But ZAKARIA is the one that I'm a bit confused by, because he definitely has the quality. The injury records do worry me, but it's also a case of he's undoubtedly an upgrade on SOUČEK because we've seen it in bursts. But that's the problem. The bursts are you know, not consistent. And if we are relying on him, and that's where I think that's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess I kind of see it as if both of them were brought in, in my view, they will be brought in to improve the base layer of our squad. And they will be supporting stars, if you will, to whoever comes in. Obviously, when we talk around the Declan Rice, we've said it time and time again, you need two to come in. So maybe the idea would be to let the likes of Downes go, maybe let the likes of obviously SOUČEK go, to improve our baseline with two players like these. Granted, slightly checkered past with injuries, not necessarily for long injury periods, but they do tend to sometimes pick up injuries, or their fitness isn't always at the optimum, as well as consistency. That to bring in these two then means you have two very good high-level supporting players, and then obviously, as we said constantly, but buying those two replacements for Rice, that Rice money then brings in those two replacements as such, those two to come in alongside Paqueta. And it's something me and you constantly talk around, is value for money and resale. And any way you look at these deals, they do represent an opportunity for West Ham to either make money on the deals because they are of such a relative fee to their talent, and also to the simple fact that their age, they're going to at least maintain that level or that value. So in that respect, it's not a bad deal. And if we look at, BERGE, for instance, who's probably the more likely, you could argue, probably of those two links. Last season he did perform incredibly well. It was a lot more advanced than what he was when before he came over, because obviously he came from the Belgian league, and then obviously Sheffield United, a bit more of a defensive midfielder, but has played much more on that right-hand side of midfield, been far more kind of more forward thinking, a bit like how Billing has probably kind of evolved over the last kind of 2 seasons or so. And obviously this is compared to, the kind of the other European leagues, so the runs below. So we're talking about the Scottish League, the Portuguese, the Austrian, and obviously the Championship as well. So when you look at how he's performed, obviously against those in the Championship as well as those teams, vastly above the average. Obviously, in being 6'5", he meets the David Moyes height check. Obviously, he's quite good in the air. He is strong defensively, however, not been that involved defensively this year. But it's kind of when we look at his influence in that attacking third, the ability to carry possession, the ability to carry the ball. Again, with his passing, he's got a good level of kind of key passes this season. Again, progressive passes not as high, but again, if you are as good as he is in terms of being able to drive with the ball, you're going to do that far more than actually obviously utilising passing. And whilst his passing metrics in some cases are below the average, we also have to slightly caveat it because again, he's more advantageous positions and looking to try and play through the opposition. I don't think he's necessarily that creative. I think obviously the Premier League is a fast step up. He does have the ability to pass. My concerns always have been with Sander Berge is that his mobility sometimes, he's very good at moving with the ball, but it's that when he has to turn and when he has to kind of forced into those kind of tight situations, he is a player that because of his height can be quite, leggy, can be kind of a bit, ungainly, unbalanced. And it can be kind of turned quite easily in some cases. Obviously, like most tall players in that position, he can struggle with it, but also he does have those periscope legs to kind of pull someone back in. But it is one of the criticisms I've always had for Berge, and why I've always felt slightly unease with him because other aspects are good. There's those kind of moments which kind of turn me off the idea.
I think one of the key things with him is he just needs to get on the weights. Like if he bulks up a bit, he's so big that he can hold players off and he gives himself that room.
Really, if he had that physicality about him, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably how you solve that because he's never going to gain that quick turn, I don't think. But he definitely can bulk up and add a bit of strength that just gives him that extra second or two when he can push someone away a little bit and create space for himself. So I think for £10 million, look, it would be a great deal. I also think if you are probably looking to sell Downs for about a similar level, that's a massive upgrade. It's just a case of I kind of like us to look elsewhere. I think it's very tough for me to look at someone's injury record or look at someone's fitness record and be like, because look, you can say whatever you want about SOUČEK, but he was Mr. Fitness in terms of he's going to cover distance and he's going to play every week if you ask him to.
Yeah. And in fairness to Berge, he did go the whole of last season without an injury, and obviously ZAKARIA had a calf injury, I think, when he kind of first signed for Chelsea as well. So in fairness to both, they were relatively injury-free over the last kind of 2 seasons. But again, as you said, there is a history of maybe some longer periods out for injury, which is a slight concern at a club that seems to love to have players out for a long time, as we saw with Cornet getting his 1 in 300 or whatever it was, diagnosis. Oh, sorry, man. Yeah,
No, I completely agree.
If we're looking as to kind of finish this up, if we were to sell, say, Downes and SOUČEK, and we were looking to bring in both of these, how do you see their position in the squad, and how do you see them maybe being utilised on the pitch as well?
I mean, I see it as a really good addition in terms of depth, particularly when you think about looking at the bench and looking at the quality that, you know, if you let SOUČEK go and you let Downes go, then you're going to have either of one of them on the bench, and that's a big upgrade from Downes. I think the sort of issue I have is that when you're talking £25 million or even £30 million probably for the combined fee that they take, I just think you can get someone who's really sort of solid, and you know, you could probably look to say to someone like Southampton, just use Downes against the fee for that.
Would you maybe even look at the youth system? Because we've got, say, you know, Potts, who granted didn't get to play much last season, but had a little brief cameo. You know, is it time to maybe also, if we are, say, going to move on the likes of Downes, maybe bring in a young player from the youth system like Potts to make a claim over the course of the season, or at least for 6 months before then maybe reviewing? I
think if you're going to look at doing that, you can't do that at the sake of dropping quality. You know, it's very much, I'd love that to happen, and I'd love one of the academy players to force their way into the plans of Moyes' plans, but that has to be on them. That can't be on at the sacrifice of the first team. It has to be the fact that, you know,
well, I guess the argument is Flynn Downes wasn't in the first team picture at all last season, other than when we was in Europe. So is that actually a sacrifice if, for instance, we were to look to someone like Potts to come in to that position to then sell a player to free up money to go into another position?
I think it's about progression, but also just, yes, he didn't, you know, light the world on fire, but he did what he was asked to do. And, you know, some of the time he was asked to play further forward than he ever has done before. And I think we can't really judge too much on that, but I'd feel a lot more confident about someone like ZAKARIA coming in or BERGE coming in to play that role than I would about an academy player. And that's nothing against the academy. It's just a case of these are professionals who've got lots of minutes under their belt in comparison to someone who hasn't played senior football much. And, you know, if they are coming in, it has to be the manager to make that call. It shouldn't be a case of, well, we haven't brought anyone in who has the quality. It should be, this youngster's really impressing me, therefore I'm going to make the call to put them in the first team or put them in the match day squad, not the other way around.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that, really. But yeah, what do you guys think? Do you concerned by the potential midfield merry-go-round that seems to be rumoured at the moment? Are you pleased to see these players being linked with moves away? What would you do in this situation? Would you be looking to keep one, get rid of both? Would you be interested in BERGE and ZAKARIA? You know, let us know in the comments. And guys, if you have liked this, please do like, please do subscribe. You guys have been awesome recently. We've just had a massive influx over the last month or so of people subscribing. We really appreciate it. People watching videos, massively appreciate it. Thank you very much to everyone who has been liking, subscribing, and also engaging in the comments as well. It's been really good. And again, if you like what we talk about here, go follow us on Twitter. Again, if you're looking to understand types of players that we think we should be looking at from across Europe, go check out our pinned thread, which has a very extensive list of players as well. And as ever, thanks for watching, guys. And Sloth, there is all but one thing left to do and left to say, and that is,
come on, you Irons.